This week on Rockstar Superhero. Okay, so sometimes I get a little animated. It might happen when I hear a certain song or see a movie that really connects with me. But I'll have to admit it's rare when I connect so strongly with the political leanings of a self-professed anarchist. My interview with Marco Malcorps, the shredded voice of the Danish death and grindcore band Anti-Ritual, was full of deep perspective and challenging topics. It's a real treat when someone is so well prepared to defend and extrapolate on their opinions, especially when it's counterintuitive to traditional Western anti-socialist thinking. Marco had me all up in it, man. I loved every second of this conversation because it was real, ferocious, and yet somehow lovely and light. There is a real conviction behind Marco's words and thoughts, and they aren't random. They are carefully placed and important because a family is at stake. A world is at stake, for now and the future. Do not shy away from this conversation, people. Give it the space to breathe and allow yourself in to connect and to consider. This is a conversation for the ages, and it is my joy and honor to share it with you today. This is Anti-Ritual on the Rockstar Superhero Podcast.
I'm raised in a family with a couple of jazz musicians a couple of generations back.
Wow.
And I had a grandma who lived with us for a while who was a big music nerd, and she definitely passed that on to me. Was always deeply into jazz and all that, so I grew up with all that stuff, and that always influenced me. Yeah. I kind of damn my parents for not forcing me to learn an instrument while I was younger, because I think it would have been fun.
Yeah.
And then at some point, I started getting into politics and getting into the DIY punk thing. And then I love the ethos of, like, it doesn't matter if you're not good, just play something,
Yeah.
And yeah, that was my route into music, basically.
Yeah. Well, so given all that, then, do you consider yourself a traditional artist, or do you see yourself as an outsider in that sense?
I mean, playing with a bunch of guys that are really skilled musicians and can play a lot of different stuff, I guess I do see myself as kind of an outsider, because I wish I could play something, but all I have is these vocal cords,
Yeah. Yeah, but those vocal cords are incredible.
Yeah, some people think that. It's nice to hear, man. I'm not good with compliments like that, but I'm glad people seem to like it. That's nice.
Yeah. Well, most people from Scandinavia tend to be this way, sort of introverted, right? Thoughtful about who they are. Love obviously expressing themselves through their chosen genre, but not necessarily want to hear how lovely or amazing they are. I totally get it. When I was a little boy, my mother used to have me sit down at a table, and she would give me some paper, and she'd give me a box of crayons, and she would say, well, actually, she would play Beethoven or Rachmaninoff or even Wagner. And she would say, draw what you hear, draw what you see in your brain. And I've always been grateful for this perspective. And, with you just talking about jazz being a huge motivator in your family through many generations, I wonder how that motivated you. How did that music inspire you as a child? Because it's so different.
I think it basically made music a very top of mind thing for me always. Whenever I was drawing or doing whatever I was doing, I would put on music. And as soon as I got to the age where you start forming your own opinions about music and the world and that stuff, jazz became a natural part of it. I never felt any urge to kind of rebel or listen to some crazy fucking gore grind or something. That came by itself. But I don't know. It's always been with me. And honestly, if I could play an instrument, I would probably play something like jazz. I would love to be able to do that. Because again, it has been with me nearly always. And I mean, looking through my record collection, I want to say maybe 25% of the total is hard music. I mean, there's all kinds of shit in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
The rough stuff just happens to be the stuff that I know how to do myself, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, if you're good at something, roll with it. But
Exactly.
it makes so much sense. And the thing that I've discovered over the years of doing this is I get to meet people like yourself that have such a mindset of diversity, right? They're focused on one thing and they're probably exceptional at a few of those things, but they've test driven so many ideas, right? They've kissed so many frogs looking for a prince, but the album collection is a beautiful collection of frogs, if that makes sense, right? It's this incredible way of showing this is a life I've lived, and I've lived this between my ears.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. That's the beauty, digging out a record that you were deeply into when you were like in your early teenage years.
Yeah.
And putting it on, and I mean, let's be honest, oftentimes you're like, ooh, that didn't age well. But then every once in a while you dig up this gem where you remember every hit of the drum, you remember every lick of the guitar, all the lyrics, you have it on your backbone. And when you put it on, it still feels fresh, even though it's songs about being a teenage and skateboarding, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I have an album that I go to whenever I am really feeling sort of down about my future. I'm human, right? I go through moments of hopelessness. And when I was a child, when I was 7 and 8 years old, the Bay City Rollers were coming up. And I will go back and listen to an old Bay City Rollers album. I'll go back and listen to an old Hudson Brothers album. I don't even know if you know who they are. But that era, that early 70s sort of power pop, pre Cheap Trick, early Elton John, very, very inspiring, and makes me maudlin a bit, but it reminds me of a time when life was beautiful.
And simpler. I mean, you were yet unaware of how atrocious, well, not life, but the world at least can be at times, Yeah. I do the same with stuff like, all those, I want to say mid-90s, like all that pop punk stuff, like with On Your Side of the Pond, it was NoFX and all that stuff. But over here we had something called Burning Heart Records, which basically the European version of all that. Yeah, and especially a Swedish band called Satanic Surfers was my bread and butter back then, and I still get into that.
Nice. Yeah, I love something that takes you to a place that you can smell it, right? You can taste that moment in your life, and it's just freaking rad, man. It just crushes me. We talked about beauty a second ago, and I've never been to Copenhagen. But I know that area of the world, I should say, I believe that area of the world is quite naturally beautiful. And I know a ton of bands from the area, from the city, from the metropolitan area, and they're all so radically different. I mean, you are nothing like Vola, which is nothing like Feather Mountain. Do you see what I'm saying? Which is nothing like, Ghost Iris, right? And, I've never been there, but is that natural beauty? Does that sort of create a sort of an alternative sense in your band? Are you trying to fight against what you see?
I think the natural beauty is Denmark is kind of in a weird spot like that, because to the north is Sweden and Norway, and they have natural beauty out the wazoo, like huge mountains and whatnot. Right. To the south is Germany, again, lots of huge forests and mountains. Denmark is pretty much a pancake, man. There's not a lot of interesting nature here, so.
Okay.
But I mean, I don't know. I guess we live in a very well solidified welfare state, so we all grew up even though my family wasn't well off, we were never in need because, school was free, healthcare was free. Yeah. And I guess that kind of affords you a room to express yourself. When you don't have to worry about a lot of stuff, then culture becomes, I think, a bigger part of your everyday life.
Yeah. This is one of the topics I wanted to touch on today. I've talked to a number of bands from the area and Scandinavia in general. You talked about just a moment ago, Denmark, Norway, Sweden. You have a similar cultural landscape, maybe not the physical landscape, but the social aspect, right? And the arts are supported there. There's grants from the government, the way the public treats music and art in general. how much has the Scandinavian way of life, been an influence on you growing up within that culture, or how does it affect the band?
Pretty substantially, I feel, because again, we're it's fairly easy to focus on your music or your art or whatever it is if you really want to. I mean, because again, there's a big, like, what do you call it, sikkerhedsnet, like there's always a net to catch you if you fall. I mean, sure, it's not perfect and it could be better, but. And I mean, being a citizen here, you'd always find like the small stuff you can criticize and the people that fell through the cracks. But if we look outwards in the world, we are ridiculously lucky.
Yes,
compared to so many other places,
Yeah. I mean, here in America, I mean, you already know this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the political bullshit we have here is mind-boggling. There's so much money to be made in politics, and the idea behind caring about our citizens is, it's about 5%, right? If you get sick, I mean, truly sick with COVID happening, people are dying left and right, and nobody's helping anybody. They're forcing vaccines because that's their answer, right? That's all they know what to say, which is, as long as you're not being bothered by it, I'm not being bothered by it.
It's a scary concept as living in this little fluff ball called Scandinavia. The concept that you can get sick and that can lose you everything in the States is mind-boggling, man.
Yeah. For a place that everybody says they want to go and live or grow a business,
and that brands itself as the big freedom fighter of the world,
Yeah. The only thing we're good at is making money. We're not good at democratic thinking, and even then, we're not necessarily good at making money. We're good at debt.
I don't know. What I found is the U.S. is good at a lot of things because pressure breeds counter pressure, and for every 10 hyper-capitalist assholes, there's 10, maybe 20 people in the completely opposite direction.
True.
Sure, as a European, I've only been to the States once, but when you travel there, you, I guess, attract or seek out the more like-minded types from your country. But, I mean, and obviously having been in this community for so many years, I've met tons and tons of bands, and it's been some of the nicest people ever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, there's two sides to the coin,
Of course. I guess I'm complaining, but yeah, it is.
That's completely natural, dude. I could spend the rest of this interview talking about how shitty of a system we have here, and in the end, it's a super privileged position. But you'll always find the wrong stuff in your own area,
Yeah. Well, that's true, and I'm always seeking moderacy. I mean, I'm not an extremist. I may come off as an extremist in music, saying I love something so much, right, I'll die for it. But it's not that way when it comes to life. I actually want to figure out compromise so we can get along. I want to get along. You know what I mean? Anti-Ritual doesn't seem to want to get along. But let me ask a kind of an odd question. It's more of a paragraph of thought. But when I was listening to the material, I wrote this down. I'm actually going to read from what I wrote. I wrote, Anti-Ritual is to dark grindcore what Devin Townsend is to coffee. There's this huge dark tonality that is completely undeniable. And I mean, obviously, I can ask you, how did the band come together? But I can also tell that the band has been around for a while, just hasn't released much music or has much social media presence, which really caught me off guard because in this day and age, it seems to be so common. So my point really is this, and maybe you can address it. It seems to me that you are very deliberate in what you release and when. And I think that's to be celebrated. So what's your takeaway on not necessarily being social media savvy and your slow release schedule?
The social media thing was a deliberate choice for us to begin with, seeing how fast it enveloped all bands around us, because I'm going to come off as a super old dude, but I was part of the punk scene and all that before social media, before that was a thing that you had to take care of as a band.
Yeah.
And just to pull out a really tired cliche from Chuck Palahniuk, at some point the things you own end up owning you. And it's just going to become another thing you got to deal with the band. And, oh shit, we got to interact with our followers. We got to post interesting content. Yeah. None of us had any interest in that from the beginning. And we kind of wanted to take a different approach to the whole being in a band thing from the beginning. The slow release schedule is pretty easy to explain, actually. The band has always been a side project for all involved parties, apart from myself.
Okay.
I played in some different bands before. Like, I just turned 40 not too long ago, so I've been doing this for a while. So it was always kind of a side project for everyone else. Mm-hmm. And we basically came together to do the first EP because Jakob, our guitarist, and the drummer Nikolai was like, we want to do this project, blah, blah. They brought me in. We did the EP, and then that was kind of out of the system, and the other guys had to do some other records and do some other projects. And we kept going back and forth during the next couple of years to figure out, like, all right, do we have more material in us? Was that a one-time thing? And it quickly became evident that we had more in us, but
right.
Now we knew where the stone was. Then you had to kind of chop out the statue, and then flick away at it, and there was time. But every time we went into the rehearsal space, we could feel like, all right, there is more material here. And then it was just a matter of us at some point kind of concentrating the process and being like, all right, let's do it. Let's grind out the record that we know is in there somewhere, and then just get it out.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, the point being is that you finally have something to say again, right?
Yeah. Well, I think I've always had something to say, but now I have a soapbox to scream from, I was joking with my wife. We've been together for 6 years. Uh-huh. And in all the time we've been together, we've never played a single concert. I mean, she sometimes jokes. She's like, yeah, you tell me you're in a band. You're not. I don't know. I've never seen any evidence outside of a record that could be somebody else and you singing on it,
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. No, that's awesome. Well, it makes me think. I mean, you mentioned politics a couple times, and if we can touch on it for just a few seconds. I mean, I don't want to take it off down to the deepest rabbit hole, but it is fun if you're passionate about it, right? When a band like yours writes such intense music, you can't help but have an air of politics around it, because even if it's not political, people think it is, right? Some people don't understand lyrics, right? They literally can't make the words because they're being yelled at them, for example, right? But to me, what I hear when I listen to you is there's an almost "how dare you do this to us" mentality. And I wondered, is this something that just happens to bands like yours that have a powerful message? I mean, do you feel it's your band's responsibility to be political?
I think part of the whole point of the band for us all has always actually been finding some kind of positive outlet for a lot of the negative feelings or all the frustration you have in you. Because I bill myself an anarchist, so voting for parliament here, I don't see it making a lot of difference. And like trying to sustain a family and have kids and all that, I don't have time to spend every waking hour of my life doing Food Not Bombs and other community outreach stuff. So to me, writing music and writing the lyrics has always been kind of a way to make something positive out of all this stuff, give myself an outlet. And I remember the first time I came home with a record I'd recorded, and I played it for my mom, and she was like, I didn't know you were that angry. And I just told her, but I'm not, because I have this. I have this to kind of channel it into something productive, and that helps me a lot, and it helps me a lot to put words to stuff that weighs on me. One theme that became pretty prevalent on the new record is the whole, obviously, climate thing, and the fact that as a father of three, I won't even say it pains me immensely, because it doesn't even begin to cover it, but I'm horrified at the notion that my kids are likely to meet a future less privileged than my own, because shit's going downhill.
Yeah.
And as much as you and I and everyone else wants to do something about it, we're just constantly told, yeah, you got to recycle and you got to do, and it's you and you and you. And what it's really about is the 5% companies that do the most pollution. I mean, that's what needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it pains me to look into their eyes and having them not know what I think I know or what I expect to come around.
Yeah.
And so feelings like that, having an outlet like that is what keeps me from sinking into complete apathy, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm right there with you, Marco. I'm actually an extraordinarily downbeat guy when it comes to this sort of thing, because even though there are ways, obviously, we can approach, whether it's local politics or the big worldview idea, there's ways we can fix things. And I don't want to simplify it by saying, if the world just cared about its own sort of community, whether it's, on a micro or macro level, things would be better. No, I mean, obviously there has to be solutions put in place, but people can't be apathetic, and human nature is apathy, right? It's I really want to do that and I'll get to it. But what I really hope is my kids will get to it. Right. And my wife is Japanese and I have 6 children, and I think about how fucked they are in regards to this world and what's wrong with it. And I know this sounds like an old man get off my lawn perspective, but it was joy filled when I was a kid. Yes, I didn't understand the big picture. I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand the simplicities of pollution, but I didn't feel this burden or overbearing darkness that is so clearly prevalent today. Our kids go to school and they know something's wrong. Our gut instinct tells us there is so much wrong. And you look at like Fukushima with the tsunami. Sure, your brain says, why did they build a whole bunch of nuclear plants on the waterfront in a country that has tsunamis? Why? Because they wanted free access to the salt water. That's it. It's just that simple. They were just lazy and didn't want to build inland. It was just easier to build on the coast. And they thought, man's hubris, that they could get away with it, and they can't. And so I appreciate that you have such a voice and you have so much passion. But I wonder if our voices, and I'm not saying to stop, but can we actually fix anything? I mean, do we give a shit?
We give a shit, but we can't fix this. We're up against a system that is so deeply ingrained in everything we do, and deeply ingrained in, I want to say, human nature by now.
Yeah.
That if we were to actually change anything, it would take, for people in our part of the world, it would take drastic drops to our quality of life.
Yeah, yeah.
And let's face it, most people are not ready for that. No. But that is what needs to happen. Because I mean, capitalism is such a versatile beast that it's managed to turn even critique of itself into something that you can buy fucking Che Guevara t-shirts everywhere, I mean, even critique of capitalism sustains it by now,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I think we've created a beast that's beyond our control, and the only thing that can possibly end capitalism would be some kind of severe natural disaster that will completely uproot nearly everything. Otherwise, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, Tool wrote about it, right? Enema. It's you learn to swim.
Yeah.
Right. It's a tough one. And I'm sure, I mean, I don't want to see the world go through upheaval, but it has to. I agree. There has to be a reckoning, a quickening, a complete change, almost like a dismantling of a mindset that is part of the human experience that I don't think can ever be dismantled. So
it's a difficult thing to discuss, because also the thing with the world without us and all that, it can quickly degenerate into kind of eco-fascism, and for whatever else, it's still fascism. And but it is difficult, man. It is difficult sometimes not to sit back and just view humans as a pest on the earth. But I think it's important to keep reminding ourselves, at least I think, the true pest is the system we build. The true pest is capitalism. Because without that, we wouldn't be here in this predicament we are now.
Yeah, and in Western culture, and I shouldn't say Western because you're in Western culture, but in the United States, we're so afraid of the word socialist. We truly don't understand it. We equate it. I understand it because my wife is Japanese. I understand what it's like to go to a socialist nation that happens to have Western leaning thoughts. But Japan is insanely socialist. And here in the States, we equate it with communism, which of course is also, there's a lot of great ideas in communism. There's a lot of bullshit in communism too. But, and I'm not praising it. I guess what I'm trying to say is there are good things in most things, but there's so much bad in most things that it overtakes and outweighs and creates fear. And then the ability, right, to politicize that fear to get somebody to bend in your direction. And we can't have, God forbid, we have social medicine here, because that means the doctors don't get to make enough money.
Yeah.
It's totally, it's maddening. But if I go to Japan, I can pay $5 for a half-hour massage. You know what I mean? And that guy gets paid. But they want the people to be healthy and ready to work and be a part of the system. So they give back. And even though it might come off like it's, serving the businesses, that's great. It helps me stay strong.
I had this talk with a colleague actually the other day at the place where I work. So there's this Danish oil and shipping company called Maersk. You might know, they're fairly worldwide thing. So they just came out now. Their revenue post taxes this year is 10 billion Danish kroners. You have to divide that by 6 point something to equate to dollars, but still, that's a ridiculous amount of money. The reason why it's that high is because they get tax deductions from the state. Out of that logic, that's like, oh yeah, but if we don't give them favorable tax deals, they will up and leave. And that misses a pretty crucial point, because our welfare system is what makes it very attractive to live here and work here, because you have a social security net.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that people don't bring into that equation when they talk about tax cuts for a company. It's 10 billion. Jesus Christ. Yeah.
I know. Well, but here in the States, they take the Social Security money and they use it as a slush fund for governmental expenses, right? So they actually reinvest our Social Security money to make a whole bunch of money working with various systems, inside the system to create more money to keep the fund alive. But the reality is we are in a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
We're just in a giant Ponzi scheme. So I'm pissed off now.
What I've always found difficult to understand about the States and the whole free healthcare thing is the regular, like you and me people that oppose this, because they're the ones who would benefit from. I mean, if you want to put on the devil's advocate thing, I can understand like the top 1, 2, 5% not giving a shit because they can pay for private healthcare whenever. But people like you and me, why would you oppose? Sure, you have to pay some more taxes, but hey, here's the good thing. If your kids get sick, they don't get ruined.
Yeah, they don't get ruined. They don't die.
I've never been able to understand that opposition.
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you, man. So we don't lose listeners.
Sorry, yeah.
No, I'm right there. We can talk all day. I love this. You're fantastic, Marco. This new album, the full album, Expel the Leeches, right? It came out a few days ago. And I'm curious, first of all, the title, I really want you to tell me what it means to you. But based on what we're talking about, it sounds pretty obvious. How has the response been from fans and critics? I don't know what it's like in Europe in general when it comes to music on radios or streaming. But, like here, we would never hear this music anywhere but on, say, Spotify. We're not going to get it on a radio, which infuriates me to no end. There's no market for it. But what are people telling you about the album? What are they thinking?
I've had a lot of people tell me that they were like super positive about it, really liked it. We did receive a couple of reviews that were pretty good. One was in French, so we had to Google Translate the whole thing.
Sure.
And there was a lot of adjectives. Some of it was probably lost in translation, but I remember the dude saying something like his only complaint was that it was over too fast. But then again, if you have to pull 11 teeth without anesthesia, it was nice to have it done quickly.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's a compliment? I don't know. But the response has been been overall pretty good. I mean, Copenhagen is a bit of a weird place. So from 1982, I want to say, the year after I was born, until 2007, we had a big squat here that was like obviously a big cultural part of the punk rock, DIY, all that scene. And when that was evicted in 2007, it led to like the biggest riots we've had in Copenhagen for a solid week. Point being, in the next couple of years, all those creative minds, because K-Town hardcore was a like international thing back then, and a lot of these people drifted into other creative endeavors. But like in the music community, or like the metal community in Denmark in general, if you don't fit very specifically into a box, like right now, like Copenhagen or K-Town death metal is all the row with bands like Undergang or Undergang, I think you guys, and all that stuff. And I mean, those bands are fucking insane. But the thing is, if you don't fit very neatly into a box, you kind of tend to fall between the cracks.
Yeah.
And just to sound like the most pretentious artist douchebag ever, I honestly have a hard time pointing to other bands that sound like what we do. Maybe it's because I don't know. And as thus, I think we kind of fall between the cracks. We're not going to see the popularity of bands like Undergang or Hyperdontia, some of the stuff that's really making the rounds internationally from Copenhagen right now, which is fine. I mean,
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say I disagree with you, but hear me out. As I tell everybody that comes on the show, I only have people on the show that I am genuinely interested and I'm genuinely curious about, and I love the music, right? And I listen to a lot of heavy music, metalcore, whatever you want to call it, brutal core, grindcore, all the core terms, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. I actually hate the nomenclature. It's just what it is, right? I don't want it to be defined. It sounds like anti-ritual to me. And I say this because I listen to so much, I can hear the differences. It doesn't mean I have this brilliant, perfect ear for atonality or to how to hear in between the cracks, but I do seek out things that pop in a different way. And when I heard this record, when your PR company sent it to me, I sat and I thought, I don't know if I can define this. I don't know if I can say I have heard this before. And so you saying what you just said, Marco, saying like, these other bands are sort of fit in this neat, sort of more traditional hardcore metal package or whatever it is. Sure, they have a place, and maybe you'll never sort of become that, and maybe you don't want to, but I think you do because you're not that. I don't think you need to define it. I would be curious what you say about your own material. What would you call it? I've read reviews that, call you everything, but I think it's singular. I think it stands out, and I don't know what it is, but it is anti-ritual, and I recognize it as unique.
Yeah, I think the fact that we have fairly diverse musical backgrounds also carries it into a different territory. And I mean, those local scenes have spawned some fucking incredible music, like the K-Town stuff, like Andy Peterson's and Asbest and Hjertestop. And again, I'm deeply in love with the whole K-Town death metal scene as well. There's some fucking insane stuff coming out there.
Yeah.
But given the fact that we just come from the three other guys did play in a band called Withering Surface at one point, which I want to say is like melodic death metal stuff. I don't know. I never got into it. They're going to kill me if they hear this, but but I mean, Jakob, our guitarist, I think in a perfect world, he would just be playing some Deep Purple, Dio, Rainbow stuff.
Sure.
I mean, Nikolai, our drummer, used to be part of Saturnus, which was a fairly well-known doom outfit from here. And Kobe, our bass player, got a job a couple of years back as a bass player in a fairly big band called Volbeat out of here.
Yeah, I definitely know who Volbeat is. Yeah.
Everyone does. And again, that's another completely different thing. And I, again, come from a background in shitty grindcore, power violence, crust bands.
I love it.
Shitty,
Yeah.
And a more... The other guys were never part of that squad culture and all that I was a part of when I was younger, So I think those diverse backgrounds fuels just a different take on how to do it.
it also tells me why you care so much, why I'm talking to you today, right? It doesn't mean that the other guys, it's not their band either, right? But, based on what you said in the very beginning, which is, yeah, but this is kind of like my thing, right? Like, this is what I do. And and again, it doesn't put you on a pedestal above them. It just says you're in at all costs, and your position in life, your position for your family, to protect your family, to protect their interests, to protect your environment, to protect your music is right. In that sense, it's not that you're a solo artist, but that you're just
I'm the mouthpiece.
You're the mouthpiece. You're the guy that cares. And if you don't care, fuck you.
They all really care, but again, I'm not a musician. I wanted to be, but I'm not. So I can't really bring a lot to the table in terms of when we write and create the music. But I am given fairly free control over anything related to vocals and the lyrics. I mean, I'll of course hand in the lyrics before we record it, and so they can see that I haven't turned us into a Nazi band or something in the middle. But that is my turf, that whole thing,
Yeah. The anarchy thing, how does that play out in general in society there? I mean, are you definitely the one that stands out as sort of being against common culture?
No, that's a pretty common trait amongst all of us,
Gotcha.
But yeah, again, it's gonna sound like I'm a fucking armchair, like
That's okay.
But we were all adults, man. Most of us have kids and jobs, and that's the sorry compromise you have to make with your own ideals in this world,
Yeah.
We had a song on the EP that dealt with this whole, like, we don't have slavery anymore, but we have kind of thinly veiled slavery, because you don't really, to me, slavery is the absence of choice, and you don't really have a choice anymore in terms of, do I want to work my ass off or do I not? Because, like, do you like surviving? All right, get to work,
Yeah, but if I may, just being the devil's advocate here, haven't we always had to work to survive? We've had to churn a field or do something. The difference is nowadays our definition of surviving, and not necessarily yours or mine, is when can I get the latest iPhone?
Exactly. And yes, we've always had to churn a field or something, but when we churned the field, that was to the direct benefit of us and our immediate family.
Right.
Now we're all most of us are working for somebody else and their immediate family and their needs, and then we're being compensated, quotation marks, for our time,
Yeah. Growing up on somebody else's dream.
Yeah.
Let me get to this too. In regards to the record, Indisciplinarian seems to have given massive support to you. What does it feel like to be a part of their culture? I mean, they feature some really cool stuff.
The label was basically founded to release our first EP. So the label was founded by Jakob and our drummer Nikolai.
Oh, so it's in-house.
It's in-house. It was founded mostly to release that, and then Jakob's other project at the time, Rising.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. That's rad. I really didn't know. I thought this was a small indie somewhere.
Well, it is. It is.
I know, but I mean like I shouldn't say a small indie, but maybe a big local indie, if that makes sense, right? A label that has, say, 60, 80 bands. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, nowhere near that. But the thing is, basically, like, they're very much an extension of the band itself, because, again, a lot of the local record labels here will focus on a niche, which makes perfect sense. But if you look at the broad catalog that these guys have put out, it's all kinds of local bands. Yeah. And a variety of genres. They put it out because they liked it and wanted to get it out,
Yeah. Oh, I heard
That's
something.
Here.
Oh, okay. Like, you see me turn, like, it's like, I can't tell. It's great echo, man.
Yeah.
So if I could ask you, before I let you go, if I could ask you to pick one of your children, meaning one of your tracks, like, would you take, like, No Human is Illegal or Monetary Man? Well, I love Marginalize Yourself. I think that freaking rules. I don't know what it is about it, but it really, I guess maybe just the term marginalize hits me right where I need to hear it. But
I think if for people with the political leanings that you and I have, it addresses what I see as a fairly new issue, like within left-wing culture, like this what I want to call a cult of purity now, that there's the sense that no human is one thing has kind of evaporated. And if you're not 100% in agreement with me, you're 100% in disagreement with me. And this means that large parts of the left here focus on the people that they're 99% in agreement with over the last 1%, instead of flipping the script and focusing on the people that you're 99% in disagreement with. But if I had to pick a song myself, shit, man. So when I first were given like the demos for the song that would become Necro Capitalism, I fucking hated it. And I was like, guys, it sounds like none of the other stuff. Can you please, can we talk about maybe not recording this? But the guys were adamant, and they were like, let's keep it for now. Let's try it. Let's put some vocals to it. Let's record it, see what happens. We can always take it out if we don't like it. So when I had to sit down and write the lyrics, because the process for this record has been a bit weird, but when I had to sit down and write the lyrics for it, I was like, all right, I've got these like 5 or 7 sketch ideas for some lyrical themes. Let's start with that song, because the recorded version came out better, but I still felt like it stuck out like a sore thumb a bit. So I started out with that one, and I used one of the lyrical themes that I'd really been looking forward to spinning some thread on, and coming out on the other side, that I really, really like that song. Either that, or probably The Oppressive Weight, as that is written basically directly for my kids as what we spoke about before,
Yeah, well, that one certainly speaks, because I mean, if there's such a thing as catchy on this album, that one definitely is the sort of the hookiest piece to me as well. But it's interesting that you mentioned this, because what was it? Oh, it was Necrocapitalism. It's right in the middle of the album. It kind of makes sense. It's sandwiched in. It's almost like, okay, we want to fit this on the album somewhere, but we also don't want to distract from what we've been saying or where we're going, right? It's a great middle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you can kind of breathe for a couple of seconds, because there's no blast beats,
Yeah, there you go. You can breathe for a second. Before I let you go, the last question for today, Marco. I know you're not this big pro-capitalism guy, and I'm not trying to make it all about the politics and, like how...
It is a lot about the politics, man.
I know about it. No, I know. But I mean, I guess I kind of have injected myself a little too much into this conversation and made it about my opinions. But I'm curious, is there such a thing in your worldview as being successful? And again, not in the music business, not in the sense of getting famous or, making a whole bunch of money or having an album that defines your career, all the things, traditional rock star bullshit. But, if you look back at your life on your deathbed, cheesy question, do you say, I was successful because of X? I would love that answer.
Yes. If I would have to look back at that point, I would say I was successful. I mean, if all this comes to pass, because I have managed to spawn 3 amazing children and teach them good. I've managed to spawn 3 empathetic children that knows right from wrong. That I'm not. I don't deal much in being proud of stuff. I feel pride is a weird and kind of useless emotion to have. But I'm proud when I look at those kids, because they're fucking awesome, and they just, I don't know, man. And of course, they're small extensions of yourself, so they're all also hellish and annoying. But just when I look at them, I'm proud of how they've turned out. I mean, they're 11, 8, and 3, so they can still go completely off the rails and become Elon Musk 2.0. I don't know.
Yeah.
But just looking at it now, they're amazing, empathetic, beautiful, nice, well thought kids, and that I think is a point of pride for me.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for that great answer. It shows the true nature of your heart. Your material shows your truth. Our conversation today explains your truth. I just like the guy I'm talking to so much, and I love that it's profound and important, and I am so grateful. Oh, there he is.
He had to go to bed.
Yeah.
Sorry.
thank you so much for just making the time for me today. And
Always, man. It was a pleasure.